Hi there, it's Kate. Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to do a quick wrap up of the 5 books that I've read so far in June. So let's get started. The first book I read was on my Kindle, so I'm going to try to insert a picture somewhere, but no guarantees, that may or may not work. And the book was The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. And I really liked it. The book takes place on a spaceship, a long-range spaceship, whose job it is to punch holes from one part of the universe to another part of the universe, making it easier for other ships to travel more quickly to these different parts of the universe. And it takes place in the distant future, or maybe not so distant future. The unique thing about this book is that only 2 or 3 of the crew on the ship, who are the main characters, are human. All the other crew members are different alien species. And so the book is a lot about how the different species interact with each other and kind of their musings and their observations about each other and each other's species. And so I think on the one hand, that can get a little heavy-handed. They're not subtle observations about humans and human propensity towards conflict and war, for example. But on the other hand, I think that doesn't necessarily make them less true or less profound if they're not subtle. I think it's just like you would have a conversation with people who aren't like you. You have, I know, even my husband and I, who are more alike than different, really, in the grand scheme of things, compared to being different alien species. But we'll have very frank conversations about, well, this is how, for example, your family does things, and this is how my family does things. And I've had conversations with other people that maybe live on the other side of the country or come from different backgrounds. This is how my family does it, this is how your family does it, this is how people in my part of the world do this versus how do people in your part of the world do this. I think that's the way you act when you are interacting with people who are very different than you. And so it rang true to me. As a side note, it sounds like someone's using a chainsaw outside, which is pretty common in my neighborhood. But sorry if that buzzing sound is really, really obnoxious. There's not a lot I can do about it right now, and I can only film during nap time, so here we are. So anyways, back to the book, I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it so much that I purchased a paper copy, which isn't here yet, but I felt like I wanted to read it more closely. When I read on my Kindle, I tend to consume the book more quickly, and I feel like I retain and kind of grok the book less fully. So I wanted to reread this in paper book at some time in the future, and I also ordered the second book in the series to try that as well. So that'll be really fun. The second book that I read was Assassin's Quest by Hobb. This is the 3rd book in the Farseer trilogy. I can't say much about the plot because it is the 3rd book of a trilogy, but like I said in my haul when I talked about library books last week or whenever that was, these books have all been kind of a slog at the beginning for me, and then the other 2 books picked up steam 100 or 200 pages in and got better, and I enjoyed them a lot more after that. This book, I only stuck with this book because The Live Ship Traders is the next trilogy in the series, and that one is, by all accounts, the best part of the series. Otherwise, I do not think I would have finished this book. It was really slow going. I did like the way that this trilogy wrapped up. I like the ending and the conclusion, but that was literally maybe 50-60 pages of this entire book, which is over 700 pages. The rest of it was just very difficult for me to get through. So I'm glad I finished it. I'm not going to read this one again. The third book that I read is Mary Anning's Curiosity by Monica Kulling. This is a book about Mary Anning, who was an early paleontologist in Britain. And it is a middle grade book, and it has beautiful, let me see if I can find one, it has beautiful illustrations, which are not, you can see the cover is very pretty. You can see that there are illustrations throughout the book as well. I'm a big fan of this illustrator, and that's actually why I requested this book from the library. But I ended up really enjoying it, and I think this is another one that I would definitely consider adding to our shelf so that our little girl can read it in the future. Because it really is a story about a girl who really enjoys doing something, even though it isn't, you know, paleontology. Looking for fossils wasn't something that was considered proper, but it was something she really enjoyed doing and felt that she was really good at. And so she went with it, and she did it, and she became respected in her field and was actually able to make a living for herself and her family doing this unusual thing. And I like that it's a story about not necessarily being naturally gifted at something, but it's a story of working really hard and learning as much as you can. And I think that's a good message for young children. So I like this one a lot. I recommend it if you're looking for a good, really quick middle grade. I read this in I think 2 hours, so it's a good one. Third, I read The Shadowland by Elizabeth Kostova. This is set in contemporary Bulgaria, where a young American woman, Alexandra Boyd, has traveled to be an English teacher, and immediately upon arriving, she ends up in the back of a taxi with an urn full of human ashes. And the story is about her quest to return the ashes to the family to whom they belong. And it goes from there. I think that none of that's a spoiler. It all happens within the first 20 pages. So I enjoyed this book. I had read at least The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova before, and which is about vampires. And I have to admit that through at least half of this book, I kept expecting vampires to show up. It had the same vibe. It had the same kind of atmospheric feeling as that book did. And because there's obviously kind of a mysterious circumstances surrounding where these ashes came from and all of the things going on, I kept expecting this character or that character or that character to turn out to be vampires or werewolves or something like that. Spoiler alert, there are no vampires or werewolves in this story. I think like the jacket and stuff make it pretty clear that this is just, that there aren't any, but it kept feeling to me like all of a sudden a vampire was going to pop out. When I got past that, I really did enjoy the book. I liked the way that it incorporated a lot of Bulgaria's history, which it's a former Soviet bloc country. It's not really something that even I, as someone who studied history of the Cold War, have ever studied Bulgaria in particular. So I like that. I like that it showed the transition from Bulgaria's transition from fighting on the Nazi side of World War II to fighting on the Soviet side, and then what happened after communism and the Soviet bloc took over in Bulgaria. And it was told in kind of in flashbacks as people were telling bits and pieces of this story to Alexandra. And normally that's a hard format for me to read. I get kind of discombobulated. I don't like books that have multiple narrators either for that reason. It gets hard for me to follow sometimes. But this was told very well, and I think because we were following two distinct stories, one in the present day and one in one storyline in the past, it remained compelling throughout the book, which was great. And then it all culminated at the end, and you were given the last piece of the historical puzzle, and it tied in and completed the, I don't want to say mystery, but it answered the questions that Alexandra was having about what was happening to her and why. And it was just a very, the ending was nice and neat and tidy, which is nice sometimes. And it was good. I think it was a really great summer read. One of the things that I really liked is it felt like a travel book. I really believed that Alexandra, for the most part, was in this new country and experiencing these new things, and it kind of took me back to experiences that I've had when I've traveled to countries that were very, very different. And some of the things, as someone who has spent some time in a former Soviet bloc country, some of the things rang very true. And I was like, yep, that was something that struck me as well. I'd read the next book by Elizabeth Kostova as well. And finally, a book that I just finished last night. This is Colm Toibin's House of Names. This is a retelling of the Agamemnon myth, which I am now more familiar with than I was before, but I still didn't bring any outside knowledge in, and I think that can be nice with retellings because you know, I wasn't expecting the story to go in one way or another based on my prior knowledge. So it's the story of the king Agamemnon, his wife Clytemnestra, their son Orestes, and their daughter Electra. So it's a story about revenge of different people on different people. So it's set in the ancient world, like the original myth, and I thought it held really true to that. It felt very ancient-y, which is not a word, but it didn't feel like modern people play acting at being these characters. This definitely felt like you went back into the ancient world and were reliving the story of these characters, which I enjoyed. It made me interested to read more works by this author, who is very prolific, and I wanted to see how much of the writing style in this book is unique to this story, because I felt like it was very well written, but again, well written in a way that really evoked the time period. And I'm interested to see books that are set in different time periods, how they're written by this author. So stay tuned. I plan to read more in the upcoming months. So overall, I enjoyed House of Names as well. So far, I feel like I've had a pretty good reading month, and hopefully I'll finish some more books and film another wrap-up in a couple weeks after June is over. Have you read any of these books? What did you think of them? If you have, I'd love to know what you thought of them down below. In the comments, please feel free to subscribe or give me a thumbs up. And I will see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.